Hello everybody, welcome back to the WTF1 podcast, That Time When edition. My name's Matt, and joining me for this wonderful blast back to the past is the WTF1 founder, Tom Bellingham. I'm not ever having any sort of backlash ever again for not announcing you for what you are, to be honest, and everybody forgot, and they will never forget ever again, Tommy. And Katie Bellingham. Katie Bellingham?
Oh, wow.
Katie Fairman. Your wife is not joining us. Katie Fairman, the WTF1 editor, is. Shout out to Katie Bellingham.
Yeah, shout out to Kate Bellingham.
Hope she's well.
Probably the better of the two Katies, to be honest. But
no, come on, let's not compare.
One of my 10 wives.
Although she's probably better at building a model F1 car than Katie,
100%,
would you say?
Definitely.
Yeah, 100%. But Katie Fairman, the WTF1 editor as well. So, guys, welcome. We're going to be talking about that time when Kimi Raikkonen won the Japanese Grand Prix from 17th. So, well, before we went live, I was going to say it's a comeback drive, but you're not saying it's really a comeback drive. It's just more... Well, it is.
Yeah.
Technically, I would call it comeback.
Yeah, it's a comeback drive, but some people associate comeback drive now with, I guess, say like recently we've had the Grosjean news where, he was in that horrendous crash and he's, survived the crash and got over the burns on his hands, and same with the Correa thing. People maybe associate that with comeback, but also it is a comeback in terms of
a racing comeback,
the race
sort of thing, right? Yeah, within the race. Also, obviously wearing the WTF1 beanie because we're in lockdown and hair is getting very long. So rather than just sorting it, just pop on a WTF1 beanie. Where's your beanie, Tommy?
I don't.
Huh? I know you don't like hats. Well, you should. And Katie, where's yours?
I actually love beanies, so I'd be definitely down to getting a WTF1 beanie, but at the moment I've just left it.
Go to shop.wtf1.com to find out more. Right, anyway.
Nice.
What was Formula One like back in 2005? We had teams running one set of tyres for an entire race, but they could refuel. Back in the day of refueling. My goodness me, that feels like a long time ago now. But 2005... 15 years... 15? Oh. No, well, kind of 16 almost years ago.
Oh, my God.
A little 10-year-old Katie.
Madness. But give us an insight as to what 05 was like for you, Tommy. You must have been, 42 then?
Yeah. I was a Fernando Alonso fanboy, enjoying him in the Renault V10 engines. And this was an era in the mid-2000s. If anyone went through that era, it was very much Formula One just changing a lot of rules, qualifying, the point system, anything to just stop Michael Schumacher and Ferrari winning the title by such a huge margin. And so much ended up changing. And then, they introduced this very strange thing, which only lasted for 1 year, which was teams would have to... You actually qualified on your tyre and then you run it the entire race. This is obviously before Pirelli, so they would last. And the strategy came from refueling.
Qualifying itself, actually, we're going to get into that, aren't we? But it wasn't as simple as everybody knows.
Yeah.
But 05, as you say, was a strange year where it was like, just stop Ferrari, and I guess they eventually did because Alonso won the championship. But it was Alonso versus Raikkonen, and the first non-Schumi Ferrari title since 1999. Sad Schumi noises as always. Whenever we talk about Michael Schumacher not winning, I don't like talking about it. Why do you always pick things, Tommy, for that time where I have to talk about Schumacher not doing well, huh?
I know, all those races where he did well, but there was some era. I guess
to be fair, it's not quite the same. If it's that time when Michael Schumacher dominated another race, I don't think many people would.
When he won from pole.
There's no shortage of those, definitely.
So Alonso won the title at the previous round. So just Schumi and I guess Hamilton things where it didn't go down to the wire. And Raikkonen and McLaren were fast, but McLaren, as they have been a few times, well, with Hamilton as well. Sometimes we saw when he was at McLaren where they were really quick but unreliable, weren't they?
It was Adrian Newey's a classic Adrian Newey car of extremely fast, but would break down a lot. They had a lot of engine blowups. I'd probably argue the McLaren was the fastest car. It was just very unreliable, and Kimi Raikkonen had a lot of races where he would retire from the lead, which is why Alonso won the title so comfortably.
Yeah, Kimi could have probably won about 10 races that year, but instead reliability cost him 3 of those, so he had 7. But McLaren did win 10 races to Renault's 8, but in the end of the day, McLaren just didn't get on with that car. And like you say, Tommy, there were lots of issues and hiccups throughout the year, which cost Kimi the title that year.
It did indeed. We've actually mentioned just very briefly about the qualifying system. Let's dive into what that format actually looked like back in 2005. And it was a classic mid-2000s strange qualifying system. They loved to just try and change something that wasn't really broken. I actually really like what we have now as qualifying, as a qualifying format. But back then they decided to do all kinds of things. Was the 2000s when they had the aggregate stuff as well and everything else?
So that was this year. But they ditched it. If anyone listened to, I think we did one about aggregate qualifying, maybe about a year ago now.
I think it was audio.
Yeah. And that was the start of 2005, where you would do 1 lap qualifying on Friday, 1 lap qualifying on Saturday. They'd be added together, and then unsurprisingly, people didn't like it. The broadcasters didn't like the fact that quite a significant event was on a Friday when a lot of people were working and stuff, and it just got very confusing and silly. So they ditched that, but they still had this 1 lap qualifying where, you start with your race fuel and tyres. And obviously this is when you had refueling. So that's when the strategy came in. Some people would short fuel, try and go for pole and have to make more pit stops. Some people might fill it to the brim and hope to go long. So
it's really strange when you look back at how qualifying has changed, because maybe for some new fans, they'll think that what we have in place now is just what it's been like forever. But like you say, they experimented so much with different qualifying setups. And this one in particular was definitely one of the worst. Like you say, 2 single lap qualifying runs, one on the Saturday afternoon on low fuel, the other Sunday morning when the cars would be fueled for the race. And that idea was dropped after 6 races in 2005 because the teams hated it, the fans hated it. It meant there was no drama on a Saturday. And so instead they did the 1 lap qualifying on the Saturday to decide what the grid would look like with the race tyres and the fuel. But super.
Sorry, you're
weird.
right. I said it was Friday, Saturday. It wasn't. It was Saturday, Sunday, and that's why everyone hated it, because Sunday morning kind of ruined that intrigue where you had a whole day to be excited for who was on pole and stuff, whereas it was decided. Do you know what I mean? Imagine now the end of Saturday, you don't know who's going to be on pole. It'd be a bit annoying.
Yeah, we've had it recently where rain has stopped a qualifying session and stuff, and you can see how much that shakes everybody up by not knowing who's on pole on a Saturday or whatever, instead having to do it early on a Sunday. But this whole qualifying system was just so confusing.
Well, I've just had a great idea that I'm sure if everybody agrees about maybe doing a full-blown WTF1 video on explaining all the qualifying formats over the years and how crazy some of them were. I think that would be good. A nice little video. So let us know in the comment section if you'd like to see that. I'm just doing podcasts, but also doing content at the same time. Just my brain never stops.
Who said
anyway,
guys can't multitask?
Qualify. I can't multitask most of the time. Qualifying for the Japanese Grand Prix. Let's talk about that then. And the reason why Kimi Raikkonen started so low, but it wasn't the only person, because it rained. So all the top runners had to qualify in the rain, which was the beauty of 1 lap qualifying in some ways, in the fact that not everybody had the same track conditions. So you had Schumacher qualifying 14th, Alonso qualifying 16th, Raikkonen 17th, and Montoya 18th. Clearly a little bit of a farce, to be honest, because I'm all for rain in qualifying, but when some people get rain and some people get dry conditions, it's just a bit of a mess.
It's mad, isn't it, that reverse grids have been mentioned, and the argument is always, well, it's not fair. Whereas this was just, if it rains, deal with it. Because the order, the thinking behind the 1 lap qualifying, it mainly got introduced because you used to have an hour-long qualifying session and people would just wait in the pits and then the track rubbers in and it's better at the end. So their genius idea was 1 lap, so everyone's out all the time, so you get a full hour of qualifying and you get to watch every individual person. But the people, they wanted to disadvantage the top runners by making them go out first. So the order was decided by the previous race result, And because Alonso, Raikkonen and Montoya were on the podium in the previous race, that meant those three had to go out at the start to do their qualifying laps, which is why they started 16th, 17th and 18th, because it was raining. And then the session dried up, and then the people that got to go out later obviously had a dry session and were loads quicker.
One lap quali was kind of exciting, though,
I liked it
ways.
personally.
This, obviously, I can see the arguments which I mentioned about the fact it's a little bit of a farce because of the different track conditions. But now that I said it out loud, I was like, yeah, but it's also reverse grid, which is quite fun. Yeah. So, because it also obviously gives people and drivers an opportunity to qualify on pole. If they get the right track conditions, it will be that way. But I guess it has that element of unpredictability that we all like. But I think I favour the Q1, Q2, Q3 thing, personally.
They were waiting.
Have a similar... Oh, sorry. I was going to say there is a similar qualifying setup in Formula E. Insert the Katie talking about Formula E klaxon here. But that's done by reverse sort of grid thing. And all you hear is the top drivers moaning that they have to go out first because obviously the more people that go onto the track, the better track conditions it's going to be for those that go on it last. So the drivers hate it. But for us fans, it's great. See much variety in the top of the qualifying, and with the race in Japan, Fischer-Keller qualified third for this, and he was fifth in the standings.
Hold on. Sorry. What was his name? Did you call him Fishy Keller?
Yeah.
Fizzy Keller.
I'm sorry. It's Fizzy Keller.
Fizzy Keller.
Fishy Keller. I've never heard that.
I've never heard that.
I am so bad when it comes to pronouncing names. Like, awful. This is why I'm a journalist and not a broadcaster, because I can type them.
Fishy
but
Keller.
I can't say them.
That is brilliant.
It sounds like something you'd order at McDonald's.
Yeah, I interrupted your flow, but I had to because, I've never heard him.
Honestly, that's all I ever seem to get. Anyway. Anytime I mention somebody's name, it's like, oh, Kate, you can't pronounce that one either. But yeah. Fischer-Keller.
Sorry, Katie, carry on.
It's okay. I was just going to say, Fischer-Keller qualified third, and he was sat fifth in the standings, so he was okay, sort of up in the top three there, but all his competition was right back at the end of the grid, really.
Yeah, he was Alonso's teammate in a Renault, and if you think he started third, and all his competitors were 16th, 17th, and 18th, so unsurprisingly, he was the favourite to win.
And still didn't win.
Spoiler.
Let's talk about the race then, and the early stages. So when Pablo Montoya crashes early on, which was big for the Constructors' Championship, wasn't it, Tommy?
Yeah.
Oh, Juan Pablo just...
Yeah, so Montoya was Kimi's McLaren teammate at the time, and while Alonso had wrapped up the title, you still had the fact that the Constructors' title was still on the line. So this...
Well, because Katie said that there was 10 wins in the season,
yeah, exactly. McLaren, so they were pretty even on points. So this was a massive opportunity for, Fizzy Keller, because he was... no one else was in the points. And the fact that Montoya had crashed meant that it was up to Raikkonen to sort of keep the Constructors' title alive, really.
Yeah, we had the big crash from Montoya early on. Also, Sato, who was the home hero, he went off sort of in the first corner. Rubens Barrichello collected him. Kimi also had a wobbly start. Like, it wasn't just a completely clean, from 17th to 1st. He ended up going on the grass at one point. Alonso, being Alonso, had a mega start. But yeah, the big shunt for Montoya in the final corner obviously brought out a safety car. Literally the entire left-hand side of the car was destroyed, essentially, which is not ideal when you're fighting for a Constructors' Championship and you've written off your car.
One sort of key moment from that as well was Ralf Schumacher started from pole in Toyota, and he'd light fueled, like we mentioned earlier, just to get pole and hope he could run away and get the victory. And he went for a 3-stop strategy with basically going really light on fuel. And the fact that the safety car came out, it ruined that strategy immediately, and that was pretty much game over for his chance of victory straight away, because he needed a clean race where the guys at the back were struggling, and you just had a clean race where he could just race away at the front and pull a massive gap, but the safety car ruined that for him. Bad times.
Well, yes, the risk you take, isn't it, with that sort of stuff? The safety car ruins a lot of people's races, but also makes some people's races, like Raikkonen. But yes, as you say, Raikkonen did have a wobbly start, but Alonso and himself worked their way through the field. And then obviously we have to talk about it, but I don't want to talk about it. 130R, obviously a very iconic corner around Suzuka, and Fernando Alonso pulling an epic pass around the outside of Schumacher, whatever. I don't think it's that epic at all, to be honest. I think it's probably it's mediocre at best. They weren't even side by side as they hit the apex. It was clear. It was a bit overhyped, really. That pass, to be honest. Schumacher could do nothing. Had a terrible car. Anyway.
Yeah, great move.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, great move. It's obviously lighter on fuel, but took massive bravery to go around the outside. And yeah, this was back when 130R. One thing that's really noticeable when I watched back moments from this race, Suzuka now is one of those tracks where we don't tend to get particularly great racing because the cars are just flat out through the whole track, and Formula One cars almost seem to have outgrown it a little bit. But this was back when the cars were a lot smaller, more nimble. Corners were actually corners, so 130R you had to. It was marginal whether you lifted or took it flat, and it was more like
you certainly weren't holding your wing mirror whilst taking it one-handed.
Yeah, was that Leclerc? Did that?
Leclerc,
yeah. So yeah, this, and basically because of this, you had a lot more overtaking, which allowed Kimi and Alonso to carve their way through the field and overtake in places that I forgot Formula One cars could overtake around Suzuka, because they were actually braking zones and things that don't exist now. But this Alonso move, was just absolutely incredible. Just took huge bravery to do it.
It was absolutely stunning. Watching it back even now, it's one of those things, you know the outcome, but you still hold your breath because it's just amazing.
I don't.
No, you just skip it. Oh,
no,
boring.
I don't even bother watching it. Terrible overtake.
But the cars then, they were just incredible, weren't they? Even watching the race recap or whatever on YouTube, the sound that they make is just insane. It was the final season of the 3.0 litre V10 engine, which was used by all teams. But yeah, that was a pretty stunning overtake. Well done, Alonso. Sorry, Matt.
I'm sure Fernando, after being on our podcast, is also listening to this.
Oh, yeah.
Of course he is. Hi, Fernando. Thanks for listening. Okay, let's talk about the next stage of the race, which was the first pit stops, where Raikkonen and Schumacher pitted and got ahead of Alonso. And it's almost like Tommy wants to literally attack me with what he's written in this document about Alonso passing Schumacher again. Does that even need to be mentioned?
Yeah, it does, because Raikkonen and Schumi got ahead of Alonso in the pit stops.
Yeah, but whatever. It's the same outcome. You can say that Raikkonen stopped and got ahead of Alonso. Don't bring Schumi into this. He had an inferior car.
Yeah, he did. He did, to be fair. For people that don't know, in 2005, the Ferrari was not up to scratch, to say the least. The only race he won was the US Grand Prix, which we all know what happened there.
Great race. One of the best performances I've ever seen.
Put up about that. So I'm sure everyone knows what happened there.
The most bizarre Formula One race of all time. So I'm doing a case.
Yeah.
But this era, for people that didn't watch it, now we're used to cars pitting, and when you pit first, you get a big advantage because everyone's on the same fuel load. You pit for better tyres. You come out, you've got better tyres. You're setting quicker laps, and you do the undercut. Yeah, it's called the undercut, isn't it? Yeah, It is called the undercut, right? Yeah. Okay. And then.
Were you actually?
No, it was. I couldn't remember. I couldn't. I just wanted to 100% make sure. And then this.
Did your Formula One brain just switch off?
But this era,
all victims
we had
to that today.
Yeah. This era, we had the overcut. So because you had different fuel levels, and when you pitted,
you go longer.
Yeah. So what happened was Alonso was lighter on fuel, which Matt, I'm sure, will argue that's the only reason he overtook Schumacher at 130R, because he had a lighter car. Ran the outside, and he was lighter, so he had to stop first. But he doesn't get the advantage because he then fills up with fuel. His car's heavier, and Raikkonen and Schumi could carry on through the race and pass Alonso when they eventually pitted, because they could do a few extra laps on lighter fuel. And
the tyres weren't exactly... Well, they went the whole race,
they went the whole race.
They were incredibly durable.
Fine,
so.
And they obviously had to go the whole race. So, yeah, they came out ahead. So Raikkonen at this point had got ahead of Alonso finally, and Alonso also passed Schumi, and then Raikkonen and Alonso had finally sort of got more towards the top of the field.
Yeah, I think when you look back at pit stops, then you think, how can you have really like much strategy if you're not changing your tyres, so many times throughout a race? But refueling was a huge part of it back then, which obviously doesn't exist anymore, which for safety reasons, which is probably for the best, because there was some certainly harrowing scenes of people being lit with the fuel leaking and stuff. But like Tommy said, the pit stops did prove to be quite a crucial point in this race.
It did indeed, yeah. Massa Singapore comes to mind of one particular blaze in the pit lane. Can't remember what year that was. It was his title challenging year.
That was when he
07?
pulled the fuel nozzle out completely, wasn't it? And drove down the pit lane.
Yeah, was that 2007? 2008, sorry, it would have been 08 because Hamilton won the championship. Yes, so it's, I think fuel was actually really intriguing because of the fact that no one really knew what strategy. Well, I mean, the teams obviously had a good idea, but in terms of the spectator, you didn't know where people had qualified exactly on pure pace, and it did have an element of mystery that I really liked because of the fact you didn't really know when they were going to pit. Obviously, you had hints from pit lane reporters and whatnot, but it did have that air of mystery of, Fisichella's in the lead, but can he go all the way?
And it mixed up quality as well, because imagine now, while Mercedes have a big gap, if they decide, we're going to do a one stop and put loads of fuel in, or even go the full distance. And then you might, Verstappen might gamble and light fuel his car to get pole, try and pull away. So yeah, you had that strategy element as well. But then the problem was with rose tinted glasses at this era, everyone just complained, everyone's just overtaking in the pit lane because of fuel. So yeah. Pros and cons.
We're never satisfied, are we, Formula One fans? We never are satisfied, whatever it is. I reckon if we had side-by-side action all the time, we would eventually start complaining that there's too much action.
Well, we did.
Can't take
2012. 2012.
Oh yeah, true. When all the tyres died.
Too much of a lottery. I don't like this.
There's 80 overtakes a lap. I hate this.
Can't keep up.
It wasn't 80.
Yeah.
Yeah,
too
exactly.
much.
But anyway, back to the race. 8 laps to go. Okay, Kimi Raikkonen goes long into the race, as we mentioned. Going long into a race is actually good because you have lower fuel load when everybody else is pit and has potentially, most likely higher fuel loads left at that stage. And he came out in second, so 17th to second with 8 laps to go. But he was a long way back, wasn't he, Tommy?
He was. So Raikkonen had gone longer, and that meant, like say, when he managed to get a little bit of clean air so he could pump in fastest laps. And at this point, there was a 20-second gap between Fisichella had a 20-second lead essentially on Raikkonen before Fisichella stopped for the final time. So when he went, this was Raikkonen's chance to just pump in loads and loads of fastest laps. He pitted, came out, and he was still probably, I don't know the exact figure, but it was around 6-7 seconds, something like that. So he still had a lot to make up in 8 laps. Yeah.
It was certainly all to play for, and very nail-biting finish to a race, which sometimes in this modern era we don't really get things like this. So certainly good to look back and get excited about this. Kimi Raikkonen being almost like a piranha hunting down this, I guess, piece of meat. I don't really know what piranhas eat, but
I love how you've used a fish reference.
Oh no, stop!
Fisichella as well.
Perfect.
I'm going to get so much abuse, aren't I? Woohoo!
Yeah, absolutely not. Of course not. Our fans are more than nice,
very
aren't you guys?
understanding.
Come on. So Alonso passes Webber this time, not Schumacher, to get up into third. And Raikkonen closes up behind Fisichella with 3 laps to go. And he took a second a lap out of him. And I remember this actual move, but let's talk about a few moves that Raikkonen tried beforehand, or at least Fisichella thought Raikkonen was trying in the final few laps, where Fisichella defended fresh air into the chicane twice. And I assume the second time, Tommy, Raikkonen took advantage of that and just swept round the outside of turn 1.
Yeah, so Raikkonen, like you said, closed the gap to within a second, taking huge...
No DRS, remember?
No DRS. And with two laps to go, Raikkonen was on the back of Fisichella, but Suzuka, we know, even in these cars, and no DRS, it was still really difficult to overtake, even though Raikkonen had this huge advantage. And heading into the penultimate lap, Fisichella basically defended the inside of the chicane. So if you know Suzuka, there's the final chicane and then leading onto the long straight. And Raikkonen was never going to go down the inside there. He wasn't close enough. But Fisichella defended, essentially, like you say, defended fresh air and completely compromised his line through the chicane. So Raikkonen could essentially straighten off the chicane, get an amazing run on him, and it allowed him to be really close up to Fisichella. So that was the first part of the move. And then on the final, coming into the chicane for the second to last time, he went for that move again, and Fisichella again defended nothing, and Raikkonen was just like, okay, I'll just take the chicane normally, and just could take it so much better, have an amazing run down the straight, and he sweeped around the outside. And I remember Martin Brundle on the commentary seemed genuinely annoyed at Fisichella, like, what are you doing? You're defending fresh air. And to this day, I do genuinely think that if Fisichella had just taken the chicane normally, I don't think Raikkonen would have won the race, because he compromised his exit so much that it just gave Raikkonen the opportunity to overtake him. It was such a ridiculous decision for defensive driving.
It is weird looking back at it, isn't it? I mean, Kimi obviously was able to catch Fisichella in these last few laps. I've got a thing about saying that name now. But even with his defensive driving and steady driving from him, you know, Kimi was close. He was on his tail all the time, just waiting for his chance, but frustrating for many fans, I'm sure. Fisichella just gave him the chance by his unusual lines that he was taking, and like you say, on that final lap when he managed to get past, Brundle was pretty miffed at it, but I think it's James Allen that I was listening to on commentary. He just couldn't believe it that he'd actually managed to get past. But Kimi, I think, and I had this as a final thought because I've prepped my final thought, Matt, in case you ask, but I'll mention it. I know, okay. I know. I'll mention it a little bit now.
Haven't even mentioned the word, straight in.
But I think a lot of people, maybe new fans to the sport, see Kimi as this quite grumpy and sarcastic guy, and you know, we all know the clip from Drive to Survive where he says, I see this more as a hobby and stuff like that. But this kind of stuff is a reminder of how good that he can be on his day, you know, to go from 17th to 1st. Yes, there were probably little perks that happened along the way that able to push him up a few places, but this is one of the best sort of comeback stories, as we said at the beginning of this podcast, and you know, hat off to Kimi because he did a stunning job on this day.
I still think McLaren era Kimi Raikkonen was the best Kimi ever drove, and even better than the year he won the title personally.
Yeah.
This was when he drove these kind of drives where he was just such an exciting driver, like the wheel banging with Fisichella, and the fact that even though the championship had gone, you know, some people might be like, I'm 17th, but the fact that he raced through the field and won this incredible race, fair play to him.
Good lad. Well done, Kimi. Where does it rank in the best F1 races ever? Difficult to say because it depends on exactly what you measure as a good F1 race, and it's almost up there as a debate of who's the best F1 driver. I don't think you can truly measure what is the best F1 race, but certainly in terms of a fight through the field and from a personal driver performance, I think it's right up there for Kimi. And as you say, Tommy, I think he was absolutely in his prime at McLaren and should have won the title in 2005 had it not been for McLaren tripping over themselves a little bit. But maybe they, with the fact that the car was so fast, maybe they took a few risks with reliability and it didn't pay off. But yeah, I it was an awesome race. Probably not the best because it didn't involve Schumacher doing well. But you know, apart from that, yeah, good drive, Kimi.
Yeah, it's for me, it's right up there with, especially the fact that it was a dry race. A lot of banging races tend to be,
but it wasn't a dry qualifying, so it's all down to reverse grids.
I can understand why people, you know, use this as a theory that reverse grids could be good for Formula One because it's exactly what you want. You want the best drivers in Formula One, and we got to see, albeit Schumacher wasn't in a great car, but we still got to see glimpses from Schumacher as well, that the best drivers in F1, the Schumi, Kimi and Alonso, essentially coming from the back of the field, making brilliant overtakes, coming through the field. And in Formula One, like Katie mentioned earlier, it's pretty rare that you get a last lap overtake for the win. Very rare. And that's pretty much as good as it gets in Formula One for me, when you still don't know who's going to... It's very rare in Formula One, isn't it, that you don't know who's going to win until the final lap. So the fact that this came down to that very final lap and it was a move for the win, what a race.
That's one of the things that made Monza last year so special, is that we had that last lap battle between Sainz and Gasly. I mean, there was many things that made that race so unbelievable, but yeah, when you can have a fight on the last lap, doesn't get much better than that. But I think Matt's right in that ranking the best races ever is similar to saying who's the best world champion ever, who's the best driver or whatever, because there are so many variables that go into making a race great, from having refueling as part of the strategy to, you know, other things. Obviously, you know a good race when you see it, and this is one of those. So yeah, I think probably in the top 10, would you say?
Yeah, I would personally.
Yeah.
But again, it's all opinion, isn't it? Really.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
But yeah.
Well, yeah, Shumi won 91 races, so I'd say this is 97.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. The Shumi bias in this one has been strong, but just know, everybody, I am joking. It was a great race from Kimi. So there you go. Well, thanks so much, guys, for your insights. Final thoughts, Tommy.
God's sake. Watching this race back, it's one of those races where it made me realise that a lot of the older tracks where we potentially haven't seen good Formula One races in a while, like Suzuka, Montreal, Albert Park, maybe you'd argue as well, it just shows that when the cars are better, you can get better racing. So it made me hopeful that in 2022, when we have hopefully cars that can follow each other better, they're not as quick, so hopefully corners are actually corners again, that these classic tracks can actually produce some banging races like this again, because I feel like it's been a very long time since we had a really, really good race at Suzuka. And that goes for a lot of tracks like that.
Yeah.
And Katie?
So my final thought...
Any more final thoughts to add your final thoughts?
Final thoughts,
said your
part
final
two.
thoughts, but...
Yeah.
But the thing is, you don't get to choose when your final thoughts come. Okay. This is now where your final thoughts are.
Okay. So my final thoughts, part 2, is that this is probably going to be Kimi's last year in F1. I've not been hopeful that he's sort of finished his... this is the part where I get cancelled, by the way. But I think Kimi's somebody that probably should have left F1 a couple of years ago. And don't get me wrong, the guy is a brilliant racer, and examples like this just prove that. And like Tommy said, this McLaren Kimi was prime Kimi. But I think it's just nice to have a look back at some of his better moments, because although he does have absolute, like, the stunning start we saw in Portugal last year, for example, proof that maybe he has still got it. But yeah, I think
he's a bit more of a meme now, isn't he, than actually... Yeah. A lot of people remember him for him being drunk at an FIA press conference rather than him doing amazing stuff like this now, I guess.
Yeah, eating a
or
choc
being
ice.
a literal world champion.
Yeah, that too, yeah.
Which I think is also kind of swept
I think a lot of people
to the side,
forget.
is that he's actually a world champion as well. But yeah, no, I don't blame Kimi, to be honest. I feel like he's genuinely in a place where he still enjoys racing. He doesn't really care if he wins. And he just wanted to go back to a team that, back to his roots pretty much. So I don't blame him at all. And I don't think he gives two hoots about his legacy, to be honest. Because, well, I mean, if you've looked at any interview ever, you can see that I don't think he really cares about what other people think of him.
I reckon he's watching this podcast crying his eyes out, to be honest.
Well, Kimi, if you are... I don't know if you'd want me to apologise, because I don't think you actually fully care.
Have
let's be real.
Ice cream.
Katie just getting that recycle bin out. Let's go.
He knows what he's
see
doing.
What old memes are in there. Right. Anyway, let's close this podcast down before Katie says anything else.
Upset all the world champions that are watching this podcast.
It's all good. Right, thank you so much, everybody, for watching and listening. Make sure to give us 5 stars or a thumbs up or wherever you are in the world, listening on whatever platform. Just give us whatever is a positive rating. Also, if you have any suggestions for future That Time When's, use the hashtag WTF1podcast, as well as any comments or just want to give us some love. Make sure to follow us on all our social platforms, which are on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe, like, follow. Literally loads of things to do if you haven't done any of those. And we'll see you next time for another That Time When podcast. Thank you so much, Tommy and Katie. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, I'm waving. Bye.
Bye. I'm waving.
Did we find out if you're waving to the right box, Matt?
Nope, still haven't checked.
Wow.
Nice one.
Bye.
Bye. Who would watch this content? Bye.
Not Kimmy.